Excellent. Well, thank you very much, John, for joining me today. It's a pleasure talking to you. So you are the CEO of 1-800-CONTACT,
That's right.
and that's a company that have received several awards, such as the Great Place to Work.
We do. We take pride in having several awards. Yeah, we work very hard for that.
Wonderful. So that's why I'd like to take advantage to talk to you today because, well, this is a hard time for a lot of companies, and especially companies that are service companies just like yours, and most of your employees, if not all of them, had to move to work remotely. So I had an interview with Phil, the marketing officer, some time ago when this just has started. But now, after 3 months, I wanted to know how things are going, and well, how do you see this from now on? How do you see it moving forward?
Yeah, as you noticed in your conversation with Phil, at that point we moved people home very early and very quickly. We're fortunate that we're in a business where very few of our employees have to go to work. The vast majority of our associates can work from wherever, and so we actually even moved our call center home pretty early in March, and so most everyone was home. We do have 2 distribution centers, one in Salt Lake City and one in Charlotte, North Carolina. And those 2, we've really adapted the way that we work as well to make sure that we keep everybody very safe. So those people that do need to be together, we keep quite spread out and have really altered our work routines. But for those of us that work at home, fortunately, we've been able to be in a place where we've been able to be very conservative about the way that we approach this COVID situation and not really push to get people back into the office. And I think this has actually been a fairly galvanizing thing for our associates because they feel safe, and they also feel like they're taking care of others. The product that we sell is something that people need. It's a product that's been actually pretty hard to get hold of during COVID because so many stores were closed and things like that. And so being in a place where we can take care of ourselves, but also take care of others has really helped. And I think for the most part, we feel like we may be more productive now than we were face-to-face. Because we don't have a commute and people can really, kind of focus on just doing their job. And so it's been, it's not great to be at home all the time in a lot of ways, as you know, but for the most part, I think that we've done okay.
Wow, so you're saying that you're even more productive because a lot of companies are complaining that productivity has went down. And in some cases, employees are getting more frustrated. Communication is difficult, right? When you're working remotely. So how are you handling that? How are you dealing with that?
Well, I'm certainly grateful that this happened in 2020 instead of 2010, because I think that the technologies available are much better. Here we are doing an interview like this, and a lot of our lives right now is spending a lot of time on Zoom. It's certainly, I think what has gone away is a little bit of the informal interactions, your ability to just walk down the hall and chat with people. But Zoom in a lot of ways, or Microsoft Teams or whatever platform you use, really provides a way to do that as well. And in fact, in some ways, I feel like I've been able to connect with people that otherwise I might not, because there's no geographical issues, right? It's not whose office is closest or wherever. You can have pretty simple conversations close by. But I think that probably the thing that has benefited the most is the way that our teams work. We've largely pushed the decision-making down into the organization, and to where teams can largely do what they need to do to get work done and feel very enabled and empowered. And so that connection back up through the organizations to executives and to the CEO isn't quite as critical to be able to get work done, so people can be very productive, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are deciding what needs to happen in each team. They know what their mission is, what their charter is. And so what I find is a lot of people are finding ways to connect both within teams. We have teams that they meet up in parking lots for lunch, sit in the backs of cars and things and be able to visit face-to-face with one another. But also a lot of times people just hop on and have a coffee break each day, maybe once or twice, and just hop on, especially smaller groups. And that's created opportunities for these teams to grow closer together. But I think also has created opportunities for teams to interact that weren't before, because they'll invite other people to join them, and that might not have been happening face-to-face.
Right.
that I have coffee breaks fairly frequently with people that I probably wouldn't have otherwise, just because it's so simple just to hop on for 5 minutes and have a chat and see how people are doing. But I think it's certainly, we feel like now our physical health is largely okay. It's mental health that we have to take care of. And so we're pretty attentive to the different situations of different team members. And admittedly, some situations are much better than others.
Right. So are you joining those breakfast or lunch that the company does every day? How does that look like?
Yeah, when we were in the building, our grill, our 2020 grill, as we call it, our corporate cafeteria, is a big part of who we are. It's a big part of our corporate culture. We have breakfast there, we have lunch there. It's heavily subsidized. The food is great. And we don't have that now. So we have had to find ways to get around that. And so some of the things that we've been doing, different teams have coffee break at different times where they'll get on and they'll just talk about what's going on at the weekend. We actually, our chef has been driving food around to people's houses from time to time just to surprise them. Obviously, you can't have everyone receive lunch every day, but we just try to surprise associates with breakfast or lunch from time to time. We have been giving out gift certificates to people so that they can go out and spend money in the local economy to help some of the restaurants that were struggling and have breakfast and lunch that way. Sometimes people bring their lunch and sit out in a park or a parking lot, especially teams that maybe their homes are fairly close either to work or to each other and things like that. So I think there's a lot of ways to get around it, and some work better than others for different people. But I think for the most part, it's been working quite well.
How you see these impacts the results of the company? Because there are many companies that are going the way you go, but it's basically maybe companies that are more like in the technological area where the employees are engineers, so they tend to empower them more. But in the customer service industry, that's not very common. So usually employees have a very strict agenda of what is that they need to say, what is that they need to do, especially because in most cases they are young employees or they are pretty new. So how do you handle that? How are you able to empower them?
I think we benefit from the fact that we have always largely empowered our associates. We run a call center much different than most that I'm aware of. In fact, I've never been to another call center that works quite the way that we do. From the minute we start training someone, we try to teach them that this is their business, that they need to run each call as though it's their own. And so we don't script our call center agents. We don't restrict them. There aren't things that they can't do that they need a manager to go do. They can largely do whatever they need to do to take care of each call. And so the point of every call is to do two things: to make the customer's day, make her feel like $1 million, and take care of whatever the issue is that she has. If she needs to buy contacts, we take care of the contacts. If she needs something else, we take care of it. And so I think that empowerment that we have always had for 25 years, really we're benefiting in being this remote situation, because we really haven't had to change very much the way that we work, because that's not who we are. We just let people take care of the customers. And then on the back end, we listen to the calls. We have quality auditors and things like that, obviously, that then can go back in and say, hey, maybe you should have done it this way instead of that way. Generally not from a policy standpoint. There may be policy things, but it's usually just this would have been more effective than this. And so there's a lot of training, but we try to inject the training on the back end instead of making it be part of, injecting managers into the actual customer interaction. And so since we've always worked that way, moving people home was almost seamless for us.
Right, so you had already several employees that were working remotely just right before this. And is this the way you work driving also diversity in the workplace, or is it related or connected somehow?
Yeah, I think that, so we did have, we had a lot of associates working at home before this, especially in the call center. We actually had hundreds of people already working at home. So to move another 400 home, we sort of already had the systems in place and the processes, and we knew how to do that. And now that we've moved people home, it does give us that chance to kind of open potentially the radius of where we look for people to work for us. We have generally kept a pretty tight radius. Part of that is being able to support them from an IT standpoint, if your system's down or something like that, being able to get people. But I think now that we're entirely remote, both in the call center and for professional staff as well, it allows us to rethink to what degree we really have to be physically present together. And that really broadens, as you said, the diversity of the sort of people that we can hire, as well as just geographic diversity, right? Gives us a chance to look more broadly at who we can hire.
Are you hiring people from outside of the US too, or are they within the US? Because I've heard several call centers are having problems because we're hiring employees outside of the US, and now moving to their homes is kind of difficult.
Yeah, no, our call center is entirely insourced, not outsourced, and it's entirely domestic. And so we haven't had that situation. The vast majority of our associates work around the broader Salt Lake Valley in Utah, other than the distribution center that we have in Charlotte, North Carolina, and then a business that we acquired last year in Tel Aviv, Israel. So we do have associates in Tel Aviv, but that's a fairly encapsulated business. We don't have any call center agents or things like that there that would cause that problem that you were noting.
That's great. And what about your turnover rates? How are they doing? Are they different from other call centers? Have you seen a difference from the way you work to other call centers?
Yeah, we in general, this valley that we're in, there are a lot of call centers. There's a large young workforce with a fairly neutral accent, and so I think a lot of people brought their call centers here over the years. And so we have a lot of competition for talent in that area for sure. And but what we find is that our turnover rate is somewhere between 50 and 70% lower than other call centers around us.
Wow.
Because of that investment that we make in our associates and trying to make it a meaningful work experience.
That's significant.
We really work to develop our people, and as a consequence, we tend to hire a lot from within. We tend to develop a lot from within. We have executives that started as call center agents at 1-800-CONTACTS. You just don't see that a lot of places. And as a consequence, also, when we need more associates, our number one source of referrals is our own associates. And so we have a lot of people with family and friends that work here. I actually have 2 daughters that work in different parts of the company, and it's a common thing.
Excellent. And the other thing that was also caught my attention was the innovation that you did on the telemedicine, right? So you develop an app which enables people to do eye exams online. Is that right?
That's right.
And
yeah.
how was that developed?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We have over the last several years really leaned into telemedicine, and COVID has certainly accelerated the return on that investment, because it felt like one of the hardest things for a contact lens wearer, or for a glasses wearer as well, is just that need to go back to a doctor to get that prescription. As a contact lens wearer, it's usually an annual thing that you have to go back for in the U.S. And glasses wearers, it could be every 2 or 3 years, and so that cost is significant both in time and money. And so we've really leaned into that because of our customers were so clear with us. If you could make this simpler and more affordable, that would have a tremendous impact on our wearing experience. And so we have our own exam that we call Express Exam. That's really more of a renewal for contact lens wearers. And then that business that we acquired in Tel Aviv that I mentioned, that's also a telemedicine platform. They have 3 products that are all telemedicine related for helping you get your prescription so you can buy glasses online.
So this is a significant change I think, in the industry. And I guess that a lot of companies are kind of afraid of moving forward to telemedicine, like being afraid of that they may take some part of their business away. So is this, how are you seeing this impacting your results? Do you see this is increasing your results in the long run, or are you already seeing the impact, a good impact, or do you have other extra costs that you wouldn't have in the past? How do you see this?
Yeah, it's definitely, I think there was a lot of resonance about telemedicine over the last few years from the optometric community. I believe that COVID has really changed the way that most people think about that. Most of that reluctance, I think, has gone away with the realization that there just has to be a way to approach these things without necessarily making people be face-to-face all the time. That a lot of these things can be done remotely. They can be done effectively remotely. They can be done cost-affordably remotely. And so as a consequence, it certainly has been a tremendous boost to our business as people can come in and get their exams. And I think for the customer, it's been a real game changer because it's just so much simpler and so affordable. You know, during COVID, we've actually kept our express exam free. So not only is it something that it may have been hard to get an exam at all, but now when they come to us, they're on average saving $150. And it's going to take you 5 or 10 minutes instead of taking a couple of hours after your afternoon. So it's really, it's a big win for the customer, I think.
Tremendous change. And are you the only ones doing this, or is already a practice that it's spreading right now?
It is something that's spreading. A lot of different parts of our industry are approaching it in different ways. And I think COVID has only accelerated that. You know, the number of, we actually support through the business I mentioned in Tel Aviv is called 6/6. And so we actually support a lot of different companies in their efforts to do telemedicine. And so you have ophthalmologists looking for telemedicine approaches, independent optometrists looking for those approaches, and then also a lot of corporate optometry businesses are looking for different ways to be able to service their customers. And so there's a lot of it taking off, and it certainly seems to be where things are going at this point in our industry.
Right. And was this part of an innovation? I don't know, something that came from some of the employees, or how was this idea developed? Was something that was from the very beginning, and now could be launched just because of COVID, or how was this developed?
The express exam that we use actually started as a partnership originally. So we worked with partners initially as we were building out telemedicine in that case, whereas some other things that we have innovated have happened internally. One example you were mentioning, something that's happened during COVID, is that we have looked at a lens replacement type business for a couple of years. So if you think about a pair of glasses, most consumers think about this as a product, but if you're in the industry, you often think of it as two products. It's a frame and a lens. And consumers often don't think about it that way, right? But what we realized during COVID is we had a lot of people calling in and they needed new glasses, not because they needed a new frame, but because something had happened to the lenses. They'd scratched them, they'd broken them, things like that. And so we had long talked about having a lens replacement service where you could send us your glasses and we would replace the lenses. So that then if you've spent several $100s on a frame, you don't have to spend that again. And so during COVID, because we had so many customers saying, kind of reaching out in this desperation, we accelerated the launch of a business that we had largely already invested in. And so that's out there now called Boomerang Lenses. That's a replacement service like that. A lot of times those things come out of these. We have about once a month, we'll do what we call Live for the Impossible Day, or what other companies might call a hackathon, right? Where you just let people work on whatever they want to. And there have been 2 or 3 of those things that have been developed and then turned into commercialized products. And actually, a lot of the ways that our teams work day to day is sort of in a hackathon sort of way, because realistically, our teams, our Agile teams at work, they basically just have a mission and then they decide how to execute the mission. And so they really, I'm a big believer that a lot of the best ideas are emergent. They come from the bottom up, right? I'm not going to tell everybody the smartest thing to do, but if you can give everyone sort of a scope to approach a customer need or a customer segment or an internal customer need, and give them some room, a lot of times they come up with, generally they'll come up with better solutions than I would have anyway.
Okay, so I see that you talked about Agile Teams. So is there do you utilize any Agile methods to capture these ideas or how are you helping these teams to promote innovation and get to these ideas generation?
Yeah, we do run an Agile shop, and we try not to be too doctrinaire about the way that we approach these things, but sort of take what works for us and then move as we go. But the system that we use is actually, I think, methodologically much like what Spotify rolled out a few years ago, where we sort of have these squads that work together. In that system, we've kind of created it ourselves. We live here in Utah, which is the beehive state, and so we use names from beehives. So our teams we call swarms. When you have groups of experts across swarms that are jointly managed, we call those hives. And things like that, but it's a similar sort of idea, right? And so the idea is to create these cross-functional teams where people will have a product owner and some developers and designer and QA and whatever they need, even analysts, designers, etc., inside of a team. Then with their charter, they can execute against whatever it is that they're doing, and then we try to bring best practices across those teams to then accelerate the way that we work. There's a book called Accelerate. We use those metrics as an example. We keep track of things like release frequency, mean time to recovery, things like that too. And that's why I can say that I feel like during COVID, we've actually probably accelerated some of the things we were doing and become more productive because we have ways of measuring that productivity that it appears that we're actually more productive, even in areas that may not be as clearly measurable as something like a call center or distribution center.
Right. So are people from the call center included in these teams too, or?
The way that they usually come in, a call center might come in two places. One is that when we're trying to do something that will affect the customer, a lot of times we'll bring in call center people to talk about what the real experience is for customers to make sure that we're solving the problem that needs to be solved. The other is one of the teams actually specifically supports the call center and their applications. And so there's a link in there as well to make sure that we're continuing to make them more productive and their jobs more meaningful.
So you use this way of working for the teams, you use it only for these specific events, or that's the way you work every day?
Yeah, that's just the way that we work.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's amazing. So you're seeing results when you shifted to the Agile methods. Are you seeing more innovation, or how can you explain those improvements?
Yeah,
how can you measure them?
That's a good question. I think there's two ways that we measure the progress, and I think it's just it's continuous delivery, right, and continuous improvement. So we're always just looking at how to improve the system. So we don't necessarily look at we implemented something and now we've figured it out and we doubled our productivity in doing so. Everything is just a constant set of improvements and changes. And so the main things that we have found over the last couple of years, we have run ostensibly some sort of Agile methodology for probably a decade. We've accelerated some of the things that we do and changed the way that we manage and measure those things in the last few years. And the ways that we feel like we can demonstrate that it's accelerating, one is that those metrics that we track are dramatically improving, and anything that you measure is likely to improve. If you get just visibility on things, right, get sunlight into places, they're likely to improve. And so our release frequency has improved, our release sizes have shrunk, things like that drive much quicker impact to the customer. And then on the business side, we can also see the results because we can see improving order sizes, conversion rates, whatever the case may be in the different areas. And so we really try to measure things both from kind of a technical performance standpoint as well as business performance, because the two they both have to work in order to make the progress sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that seems to be amazing because looks like your company keeps growing even during COVID time. Is that right? So how are you? You're still hiring new employees?
We are, yeah. We have actually hired, we have about 1,000 employees, and we have hired almost 400 this year. So we've really had to hire up and grow because of the demand that we've had.
And how was that during like working remotely? Are you hiring everyone remotely and training them remotely? Is that working fine so far?
Yeah, mostly we are. We have now brought several call center classes through that have never actually worked in the building, and that's the first time that's ever happened. And I think we're getting to where it almost makes sense. I think people feel the trick is for people to feel like it's a great place to work when the place isn't actually a physical place, right? But we take
That's called the culture, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have really invested in those call center agents. We spend 4 weeks in training before they're done with training, and then there's a lot of ongoing development to make sure that we both that they're good at their jobs, but also that they get what we're about, that they get the culture, and maybe that they unlearn some things that they might have learned in previous jobs. And come in here and really contribute and make this a special place to work. So we have largely done that entirely remotely. We do have occasions, I think, where like we've hired some fairly senior people, and those I've done. I've hired some people where I've literally never met these people face to face, and they've jumped right in and made tremendous impact. Because we're largely all around in the same metropolitan area. We do have some cases where I think people have met outdoors to be able to get to know each other or things like that. But we're taking COVID very seriously, and so we've really tried to make sure that we maintain physical distance even in those situations.
So that's super interesting what you just said about unlearning. It's a new term right now. It's very common that you need to unlearn some things to become more agile or to start the type of to learn the type of culture that you develop, right? When maybe you I've seen that you also talk about we win as a team or champion each other. Those are things that are important for teams, but not every company is focused on that. So when you move from a very competitive company to a company that promotes collaboration, it's a challenge.
It can be, especially someone that maybe has come out of other call centers. Those are usually our most, those are the hardest ones for us to adapt, just because we do approach it so differently. And so, as an example, in a lot of call centers around us, maybe one of the number one metrics that you're watching is your average handle time, because you're trying to manage that down so that you can, so you keep your costs low. And in our world, our average handle time actually went up substantially during COVID. And a lot of call centers would see that as a bad thing. We actually saw it as a very good thing, because what it meant is our associates were taking that extra 20 or 30 seconds to connect with somebody. And there were people that needed connection, right? A lot of times that was just someone you just want to talk to, a pleasant voice on the other end of the line. And so that's one of the things that we have to constantly train our people when they first come in, is to listen and care. Because we're trying to bring humanity back into this direct-to-consumer sort of business that we're in. And we even create within our team something that we call our WOW budget. So each team has a budget where they can spend to try to create those customer WOWs. And you're not going to create them if you're not listening closely. And so it just takes a little bit more. We expect more of our call center agents, I think, because they have to be listening for those cues of how to connect with a customer. Customers only call us once or twice a year. And so when they call, and in some cases, they may not call for several years, right? Because they may use our website or our app or things like that. And so when we get that chance to talk with them, we really want to take advantage of it. And so we don't put people on hold. We don't put people through an IVR. And when we pick up, we really try to make their day, because we want to make a very memorable experience so that the next time they need something, they remember us.
Excellent. So the last question I want to ask you in regards to that is, it's curious, because when you're a group that is selling products or services, usually most of the companies offer, make people compete with each other, who get more sales, who can get more from the other. So is that something? I don't think it's something aligned to your culture, right? Because you are promoting collaboration. So how these companies say, well, we have to make them compete because that's the way they can sell more. So what can you say about that?
Yeah, usually when we do competitions, they're kind of tongue-in-cheek, lighthearted, and have some fun sort of things, where maybe one team will compete against another team and things like that for fun. But for the most part, the business that we're in, really, one person's success doesn't require someone else's failure. In fact, generally speaking, success kind of breeds more success. And so we try to get people more thinking about, how do you perform better today than you did yesterday? Your competition is against yourself. How do you do a better job? And if you're on the call center, that means that your quality scores are better, your sales are higher. If you're in a distribution center, it means you're faster, you're more productive. But it's because it's all about your development, right? Try to become better today than you were yesterday. I've just been so impressed since I joined the company and how diligent this company is about developing people from all the way from call center up. Our call center agents, I would submit, get more training than most executives that I was associated with before I joined 1-800-CONTACTS, because it's just a very intentional decision to develop people. That's just one of our values. And oftentimes that means that people develop to where they need to leave the company in order to have the next challenge. And we're actually pretty comfortable with that, because we care about people for people's sake, not just for the business's sake.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, John. This was great information. I don't know if there's anything else that you'd like to share, or maybe you have any suggestion for other companies that are dealing with COVID, because we don't know when this is over, right?
Yeah. And so I don't know if I have perfect advice for someone else out there, because I think all of us are in different circumstances. Right? People are just trying to make payroll. Some people are just trying to get to work and things. And so every circumstance is different. But what I have found is the secret sauce here is just really focusing on people. If we focus on our customer and we focus on our associates, everything else seems to work its way out. Sometimes we tend to start with the financial statements and work our way backwards when we're business leaders, right? But I actually have found that's not as productive. If you can focus on your customers and your associates, usually the P&L works its way out. The financials are okay after the fact. And so it's been really neat for me to see how we can touch people's lives. An example, I mentioned the customer wows that we've received. So just an example of that as we finish up. Because we do these express exams that you talked about, there are some states where telemedicine isn't available yet. There's because of different state laws, all this is state regulated, right? And so we can only touch about 80% of Americans with our telemedicine. And so the other 20% are in states where we can't. We had a customer call in from one of those states, fairly desperate, had lost her job, didn't have a car, and her doctor was closed because of COVID. We couldn't take care of her via telemedicine because of the state that she lived in. And so this associate was able to help this woman. We paid for her Uber to get to a new place to get an exam, and kind of walked her through the whole experience, got her exam set up at a location, got her an Uber and everything to get her taken care of. And obviously, the cost of that exceeded any value to an order. But the kind of excitement that creates in the call center is just, and in our company, that's what makes it contagious. And so it makes it real, being able to create those stories.
So would you say, after all you've said, I was thinking that maybe focusing on people is even more important during a crisis. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely think that's true. I think that during a crisis, everything in a lot of ways simplifies, and suddenly you have to decide what is most important to you. And I think that's what's been so encouraging to me is that when I entered contacts with COVID, as everything got simple, all that mattered were people. And I'm just grateful to work for a company where that was the knee-jerk reaction of across the enterprise. Everybody just wanted to take care of each other and take care of our customers. And I think that's what culture is built on.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John. It was a pleasure talking to you. We'll share this interview with you soon so that you can hear it too.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.